Hey y'all, so today I kind of wanted to do a bit of a discussion because I started thinking about this topic and I found it really interesting and I wanted to talk about it to you and see what y'all thought about it. So the other day as I was looking at my bookshelves, I started to realize that in almost every single book or series that I looked at, the main character wasn't my favorite character in that series. So I started going through my favorite books and series and identifying my favorite character in each of them. And the results were actually really surprising because this is the stack of books where my favorite character is also the main character. And this, oh my goodness, can't get it all in the shot. This was the stack of my favorite books that the main character was not my favorite character. Look at this stack. I can barely lift this up. I'm surprised this hasn't fallen over. So for these books where I said my favorite character was not the main character, I'm going to go through and I'm going to show you who my favorite characters are. The Weasley twins and Hermione. Warden. Will, Jim, and Magnus. Jace and Magnus. Lore. Literally anyone but Juliet, but specifically Kenji. Elder and Orion. Sam. Haymitch, Cinna, and Finnick. Gus. Annabeth. David. And of course Wesley. So those aren't all of my favorite books, but they are all of the books where I had a favorite character and where there was a distinct main character. For example, my favorite book is And Then There Were None, and my favorite character is most definitely Philip Lombard, but you kind of get to see from all the characters' perspectives, so there's not really a distinct main character. So after going through all of those books, I ended up with 23 characters that I considered my favorite characters in each of their books or series. The ones I haven't shown you yet are the ones where the main character and my favorite character match up, and so I'll just show you those really quickly in case you didn't note what the books were in the first time around. First we have Clay from 13 Reasons Why, Kath from Fangirl, and Quoth from The Name of the Wind. So of course, once I noticed this pattern, I also started looking for other patterns because that is how my brain works. The next most obvious factor that stood out for me was that out of the 23 characters, 19 of them were male and only 4 of them were female. And of those females, only one was the main character in her book or series. And if you hadn't noticed, that's obviously Kath from Fangirl. I also noticed that the 3 female characters who I chose as my favorite characters in their series were all from books or series where the main character was a guy. Another thing that I noticed was that out of the 16 books or series that I chose, 10 of them had female main characters, and I only chose one of them as my favorite character. Another interesting tidbit that I did notice was that out of the 20 secondary characters I chose as my favorite characters, 11 of them were actually love interests of the main character, whether that main character was male or female. And I'm not including Hermione in that list because Hermione was not a love interest regardless of what anyone, J.K. Rowling, says. So of course, after I started seeing these patterns, I started wondering why this was happening. You would think that when you follow one character around for an entire book, or even more, an entire series, that that character would definitely be your favorite because you've seen the most of them, you're always with them. Wouldn't it make sense that they would be your favorite character? I mean, if you love a book or series, isn't it partially because you're loving the perspective you're reading from? So I started writing down some reasons why the main character might not be my favorite, and I wanted to share them with you and see if y'all feel the same way. So the first thing that I wrote down was that sometimes I tend to see the main character as a vehicle of the plot rather than as an actual person. One example that I thought of that really reinforces this to me is the idea of shipping. Because we sit there and we're like, oh, I really want these characters to be together, even if they don't really have feelings for each other in the book or series. You're basically disregarding the fact that if these were real people, they would have real emotions that contradict that shipping. Because when we ship characters, we kind of put them together in a way that they, if they were real people, wouldn't want. And you're disregarding the fact that they're a person within a story rather than just a thing that you can do things with. I'm not sure I'm being very articulate about this, but for me, I think that a lot of times when we ship characters together, we aren't thinking of them as people, but rather things that we want to be together, and that takes kind of the humanity away from them. But like I said, that's just an example of how we might subconsciously see them as a vehicle rather than as an actual person or a character. But another thing is maybe you're reading a fight scene and it's told in first person, and you get to see a lot of what the other people are doing, but sometimes, or a lot of the time, you're just kind of watching from the main character's perspective and they aren't necessarily as involved in the scene as the other characters that are being described are. Is this making any sense? I feel like I'm just babbling and it doesn't make any sense and I'm not making my point very well. What I'm trying to say is that sometimes maybe we don't see the main character as a person, but as a plot, as something that's going from point A to point B and it's going to end up a certain way, rather than a person with feelings or emotions that might get in the way and stop that from happening. The second reason that I wrote down as to why main characters may not be my favorite is that secondary characters sometimes tend to be a lot more dynamic than the main character, especially when it's written in first-person point of view. Because if you think about it, with real people, we often tend to overlook qualities in ourselves and not recognize certain qualities in ourselves, whereas we can immediately and easily point out character traits in other people. I feel like that also happens in first-person books, where you will get attached to someone that the main character is attached to, but not attached to the main character because you don't see the traits that other people see in them. So for example, if you're reading from a first-person point of view, a main character might notice certain aspects and character traits about other characters in the story. However, with the main character, to figure out their character traits, you have to observe what they do and what they say, and sometimes that's a little bit more complex and it's easier to kind of overlook those traits that you see in a character and not really connect with them as easily. And the third thing that I wrote down is something that I already talked about a little bit earlier in the video, but it's the fact that almost all of my favorite characters that I chose were male. And it got me to wondering whether that's because I just tend to prefer male characters, or if it's because male characters and female characters tend to be written fairly stereotypically. And so I started thinking of traits that I really look for in characters and what I love in characters. So when I looked at the female characters that I chose, I noticed that out of the 4, 3 of them have a lot of character traits that are stereotypically male character traits. Lore from the Pendragon series is a warrior. She's strong, she's independent, she's smart, and she doesn't take crap from anyone. Hermione from the Harry Potter series is super smart. She's really outspoken, and she doesn't really care what people think about her. She will say her mind, whether they like it or not. Annabeth from the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series is also really strong and independent, and she's a fighter. I would also like to mention that Katniss Everdeen is a really epic character, but I really like Haymitch, Senna, and Finnick. I really like them. I think they're so awesome. I understand Haymitch. He's cool. Another character trait that I really love in characters is when they're sarcastic and funny. And to be honest, there aren't a ton of female characters that I can think of that are really snarky, sarcastic, and funny. Now, there are a lot of female characters that are really headstrong and like to do what they want to do. However, when you think about it, a lot of them make some really dumb decisions while doing that. I'm looking at you, Clary. While yes, there are many female main characters that are strong and very headstrong and independent, a lot of them aren't super logical. Again, Clary. And I will admit, that's a personality trait that is stereotypically a male character trait. And honestly, I would kind of say that funny is too, because like I said, I really can't think of any female characters that are just outright hilarious. And I'm not saying that this male versus female thing is the entirety of my argument about secondary characters and main characters. However, the majority of the books and series I chose had female main characters, and the majority of those characters were not my favorite in their book or series. And I do think that that's partially because there is a stereotype for female main characters. They tend to be headstrong, but they're also impulsive rather than logical, and so they tend to get into precarious situations. They aren't damsels in distress, but they do tend to get themselves in trouble a lot. And while they may play an important role in saving the day, it's probably not the most important role in saving the day. Except for a certain character who I mentioned just a little bit ago. You go, girl. You shoot that arrow. So that's just about all that I had for this video. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. Are most of your favorite characters secondary characters, or do you really just like the main characters? Let me know. I would love to get a discussion started in the comments. As always, I will leave a link to my blog and to my Goodreads down in the description. Please add me as a friend on Goodreads. I would love to be friends with all of you. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!